Good morning, gearheads, and I mean that in the most polite way. Yes, it's late at night, but it's the Chinese Grand Prix, round 2 of the Formula One World Championship. Welcome to Speed City on SiriusXM. I'm Jonathan Green. We're giving John the night off tonight because he doesn't like to stay up late, and so we put him to bed with his pipe and slippers, and that's where he is. But we do have the fine and dandy doyen of Formula One in America, the one and only Bob Varsha, who has graced us with his presence despite the fact it's also in the middle of the night where he is, and we're hoping to get the one and only Chris Medland as we begin our quest of following Shanghai and the second round of the FIA World Championship for 2025. And what a beginning it has been. And because this, of course, is a sprint race weekend, so we've got plenty to talk about in our pre-show leading up to the Grand Prix itself, which is about an hour away. Conditions set perfect. The fog, the mist that is usual in Shanghai, I'm glad to say, has dissipated. It was around on Thursday, Friday, but it seems to be set fair. I watched the feature race of the F1 Academy. Well done to Chloe Chambers of the USA. She had 2 podiums and therefore is in the hot seat after the first round of 2 races and is looking at the sharp end of the championship at the moment. So well done, Chloe. And of course, Chloe signing this year with the Ford Red Bull team, having left the Haas team. And we have 3 Americans involved this year and a Canadian in Nicole Havrada. But we've also got Courtney Crone, and we've also got Leah Block, who had some problems throughout the weekend. So did Havrada. But that news to follow. But let me bring in Bob Varsha. Bob, like I said, we've already had a race, and it was an eventful one.
It was absolutely. Lewis Hamilton, after all the trouble he went through at Australia, Melbourne, just a short week ago, knew the changes he wanted to make to the car. The team went ahead and made them, and there he is on pole for the sprint race, and then just drove away. Now, yeah, it's just a sprint race, just 19 laps, difficult racetrack, totally repaved. Nobody knew what they were getting into when the weekend started. But Hamilton in his Ferrari managed to keep his tires under him. They only run 1 set, no pit stops, and came through to win the race, really unchallenged. The gap at the end was about 7 seconds over Oscar Piastri, who ran third for much of the race behind Max Verstappen. But Verstappen's tires went off a cliff in the late running, and Piastri was able to get by. But a very, very happy Lewis Hamilton on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, no question. And I know it's only a sprint race, but hey, a race is a race. And when you're winning your first ever Ferrari race, that's got to be special. And as you say, he did drive away and managed his tires. That's what everybody said. But as everybody has also mentioned, this resurface, we'll talk to Chris Medland about this resurface of the track at Shanghai has meant there's high deg. So lead dog gets the best view. If you can take the lead in a race, especially 56 laps, which is coming up, then you're in a great position to hold and maintain those tires. Chris Medland is on the line. Chris, welcome once again to the show. Jump in with anything else you want to mention about the sprint race. But congratulations has to be for Lewis Hamilton. He's done it.
Yeah, he has. It was special, wasn't it? It's a weird thing. I'm kind of torn on the sprint because it's not a Grand Prix victory, so it doesn't quite have the same prestige that it would do if he were to win today, for example. But it still is winning a race against the other 19 best drivers in the world in a new team that he's just joined. And the fact that he stuck it on pole and did that, it was vintage Hamilton, as you say. And I really enjoyed seeing it, but there was part of me that was like, I really hope he backs this up now as well. And qualifying didn't go brilliantly for him, but he's still top 5, which is interesting now that already at race 2, you're going slightly disappointing that he's only 5th ahead of Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. So I think it's actually been a really big step forward from Lewis. But I took a lot away from it in the sense that it shows, give him a car he's comfortable with and he can push the way he wants to push. He never looked in danger from Max Verstappen. He had Verstappen filling his mirrors for the first half of that race. And quite quickly, I switched from maybe the last 3 or 4 years of Lewis Hamilton, where you thought, well, he's not got the car to fight and Max is going to come flying by, or he's struggling slightly, to no, Lewis has this under control, and then he just disappeared. And I did expect Piastri to be a threat when he got ahead of Verstappen. And as you say, the looking after the tyres aspect Even though it's a new car, new tyres this year as well, Hamilton had that down to a T, and just he had so much pace in hand. He really pulled the pin when Piastri got into second place and disappeared to win by nearly 7 seconds. So I think that bodes well for today as well. If he can repeat in some way, shape, or form that kind of performance with race pace and tyre usage, it'll make him a factor for this Grand Prix.
Yeah, no question.
Definitely.
And, guys, I'll throw this open to both of you. I mean, I know it's only the the second weekend of the season, but are we confirming now that McLaren have the fastest car for now? Red Bull are struggling somewhat, though Verstappen, as he did last year, is covering up the cracks. Lawson cannot cover up those cracks. And actually, surprise, Russell and Antonelli and Mercedes look as though they're going to be at the sharp end throughout most of this season.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. The cream flows to the top, and we have the usual suspects up front. Once again, these are the cars they've been using basically for the last 3 or 4 years. So, they know these cars. Having said that, they've made some changes during the off season, and so they're having to refine the balance and work with these new tires. As Chris just mentioned, they are changed. They're different from last year. And of course, Australia was a partially wet weekend. That always kind of skews your data a bit. And now we've got this vicious new tire-eating racing surface
Yes.
in China. So I'm not sure what we're going to find in this. The sprint was kind of a snoozer, simply because it's a very hard track to pass on, and everybody was worried about tires. Now everybody's got to go. Pirelli's recommending a 2-stop race using mediums and hards only. Forget the soft tires. And if drivers aren't careful and keeping their tires alive, we could see a lot of position changing in this race, and perhaps even some shocking result.
Yeah, and Chris,
we've seen that in the past, actually, haven't we? Here,
go ahead, Chris. Because I was literally keep going, because that's all I was going to do.
On the other side of the world, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm so far away that our delay is my fault. But this race has thrown up some really thrilling strategy battles before. We've had a number of times where you've seen drivers coming through on different strategies. I think back to Lewis Hamilton winning here in the past, but also Daniel Ricciardo coming through and making late overtakes to take a victory because they got their strategy right. But it means you're out of position going into the final stint and you have to do some overtaking. And I think it's a great track for that. But to your original point, yes, I think it's kind of confirmed what we saw in preseason testing, where we thought McLaren are a step ahead. Mercedes did look very solid. They were probably the team that, in a weird way, spoke of being happiest coming out of testing. And I think that's because they ironed out a number of their weaknesses. They still are a little step behind. I think it's going to fluctuate a bit, but a smooth surface like this, newly resurfaced track, really does suit that car, and they've made the most of it so far. Red Bull, Helmut Marko had made some comments that he thought they could match McLaren at times. And in a sense, that's what we've seen. We've seen aspects of long running where it's been a strong Max Verstappen, a strong Red Bull, and they've been in that fight. But then as that long run becomes even longer, the tyre degradation goes up. McLaren can look after their tyres and disappear, and Max can't hold on. But he's able to put himself in that mix, which I think is a thrilling aspect of this season, is to see Max Verstappen fighting with a car that is nowhere near good enough really to win a championship, but he's going to put himself in the frame regardless, helped by the fact it's so competitive with everyone else. And to me, the big question mark will be how quickly do Ferrari become consistently competitive. Based on what we saw from preseason testing, Melbourne was a big outlier. That was a really poor performance. The team got a lot wrong there. And I think that's been emphasized by how quickly they bounced back here in China. But that also shows, maybe they'll get it wrong again in future. So they need to find that sweet spot of that car as quickly as possible to put the pressure on McLaren. Flip side, something Lando Norris said yesterday was that McLaren are just clearly got the quickest car, but it's tough to drive. And you can make a lot of mistakes with it. Sometimes it's not quite in the right window. If it is in the window, he said we can put down some really quick lap times and no one can really touch us. But if it's not, we're right back in the pack and we can't do a lot about it. I think that's great as well. It's fun to see even the team with the quickest car having to work so hard. And maybe it's a bit reminiscent of what Red Bull was like for a couple of years, and Verstappen, as you say, masked those issues. But so far, the two McLaren drivers are having to work really hard to get the results out of this.
Yeah, it's not as clear.
Red Bulls.
Go ahead, Bob.
Well, I was going to say Dr. Helmut Marko had some thoughts on that. He said, a fast car is always going to be difficult to drive. I think he was directing the comment at his man, Liam Lawson, who said he was having troubles with it. But yeah, I can see it's exactly what you're saying with regard to McLaren. And keep in mind also with regard to Lewis and Ferrari, Lewis is the most successful driver at this track.
That's true.
So he knows it well. He likes it a lot. And I think that contributes to a driver's good performance.
Yeah, I'm interested to see the differences between Hamilton's attitude of this track and Leclerc. Leclerc saying not happy with the balance, car not, drivable at times. So it's not all happy in the red world. And Hamilton certainly, chalk and cheese from a week before where he was definitely struggling, a lot of radio talk, which in the end, Hamilton was a little bit peeved by because he felt that he was judged wrongly when he was just getting used to his engineer. He said he wasn't mad at him. But, that's Lewis on the radio in a race, whether it's the tires or the engineer or whatever it is. Lewis has always been pretty shouty. But there's no question that going into this race, Hamilton is definitely the more comfortable of the two Ferrari drivers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, look,
Absolutely.
We're going to get a break in a minute, but I want to get some of these clips in, and I want to start with the man on pole position. What a time to do it, given that his teammate won the first race. Oscar Piastri of Australia. The 8,000ths of a second. The times are ridiculous. There's 0.2 between the top six. It just gets silly. It's so close. The positions for the first two races in terms of the top two is ridiculous. It really is a blink of an eye. So, pole position, though, Oscar Piastri, 1:30.641. Here's what he had to say after qualifying.
To get your first pole.
Yeah, definitely. To be honest, the way quali went was a bit stressful. I was struggling in Q1 and Q2, and Q2 I needed to find half a second, and I didn't do anything obviously wrong. I was just genuinely struggling. And Q3 just came alive and felt like I delivered two mostly good laps. I think if you put my sector 3 of lap 2 with my sector 1 and 2 of my first lap, then it would be, there's still quite a bit left on the table. The last lap I didn't have much to lose going to the hairpin and really sent it, for lack of a better word. So, just very proud to have ended up on pole.
How are you feeling about your chances of converting that into victory tomorrow?
Confident. I think our pace this morning was good. I think the Ferraris looked very strong. Lewis was strong out front, but even Leclerc was strong coming back through. So they were a bit of we always expected them to be strong, but to be that strong was a bit of a surprise. But I think even with that, our pace was still very encouraging. So I'm confident for tomorrow.
Best of luck tomorrow, Oscar. Thanks.
Yes, a very confident-sounding Oscar Piastri. But I know it's early in the season, boys, but it is an important race for Piastri to sort of set out his stall up against Norris. Otherwise, it could all go the other way.
Absolutely. And keep in mind, this was a new track record as well.
Yeah.
These guys are flying on this tire.
And Chris,
Absolutely.
would you agree it's early on?
Piastri, I think. Yes, very. It was something I wrote about actually for Racer this weekend, was the way that the season started. As much as it was one race, to lose 23 points to essentially what most people are already calling your biggest title rival is not the way you want to start a season. And it does give Norris a bit of a buffer there. And for Piastri, it could have very quickly unravelled, in the sense that, say he just backed Norris up with the P2 this weekend and lost another 7-8 points over two races, given the fact we had the sprint in there, and suddenly he's over a race victory behind, and it was tight with Verstappen there, with the Ferraris there. I think this year McLaren are more likely to make an earlier call about who they back for the Drivers' Championship, to really try and seal both. If they're going well, but there is a threat from the outside, then I think they will go earlier than they did last year, because they'll learn from last year's mistakes. And let's be honest, Norris, it was always a long shot that he was going to win that title, but it was not helped by how long they left it. And I still actually personally think they did the right thing, because you pretty much ruin Oscar Piastri's career by saying to him he can't take his first victory and he's not allowed to fight for them in the middle of the season, on the off chance that you might get in there at that stage with Lando. I think you kind of, for the longer term betterment of the team, they probably just about got it right, but we'll do it differently this year. And to that end, if Piastri was a chunk behind already, he'd have a lot to claw back before they might make that decision. So as early as it is, we put so much more emphasis on the races at the end of the season because we look at the points picture then. They all pay the same points. They're all worth as much as each other. So this is as valuable as the final race of the season. And I actually thought coming from 23 points down, one, it was crucial that he fought back to ninth in Melbourne and just got something out of that race.
Yeah.
But then the job he did in the sprint, he's cut that gap already, I think, to 17 points. It gives him a big chance of putting himself, only 10 points or so behind Lando today if he can convert. And the flip side is, we talk about Lando, but George in second and then Max in fourth. George is 6 points behind Lando, Max is 2. So either of those could realistically be leading the championship after this race, even though we're talking about how competitive the McLaren looks and Lando versus Oscar. So it shows that you've got to stay in that fight as well. You can't be kind of cut adrift of it because there's so many cars, it's so competitive that if they do make an early call, Piastri has to make sure he's right there. And that's why it was crucial. And as you say, that's his first pole position in Grand Prix racing, which didn't really stand out, did it? Because he'd done it in sprint races and won races.
Right.
And suddenly you realise, he's never done it on a Saturday. So it was, a really, really good response from a disappointing weekend for him in Melbourne.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about that as we lead up to the Chinese Grand Prix, round 2 of the FIA World Formula One Championship. Coming up, we'll take a short break. We'll be back, and we'll be talking about George Russell, Lando Norris, and Max Verstappen. Coming up. Yeah, I notice YouTube fans, welcome. I noticed that I thought it was kind of interesting that they were on at Melbourne. They were on with Zach, and he kept saying, "Oh, I'm just going to let him race," and it's like, yeah, McLaren have been here before, and I get it. That's just him trying to be the arbiter. But it can bite them very quickly, and it did last year, frankly. So I don't know. You're right. I agree with Chris. It's going to be early, and they need to call it early. Otherwise, they're just going to have two guys fighting each other that'll eventually do a Rosberg Hamilton and eventually do a Prost Senna and hit each other, and it could happen today. But the point is, house rules. Somebody's got to be in ascendance, in my opinion.
No, I totally agree. I think the way that McLaren have been looking at it was they were hoping they were far enough ahead that they could let it be a bit Mercedes-esque, and it's just between the two drivers and there's no external threat. But even 2014, it wasn't that late in the season that Daniel Ricciardo was in with an outside chance of the title because Hamilton and Rosberg were fighting each other so fiercely. Mm-hmm. And Ricciardo became the guy that picked up a few wins and a lot of podiums. And even though he's never really there on pace, he was there on results and points. And it could have got interesting if there was one more big incident between the two Mercedes drivers. So I don't think they're going to get the luxury of that buffer. But I think that's what McLaren wanted, was to be so far clear they could let them race all the way through. This way, I think they've got to let them race for a long time, as long as they can.
Just go straight into the lead at the beginning.
That line to make the call will come earlier, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's something to be seen in the Ferrari garage as well. Leclerc seems very down in the mouth about. I don't know if it's about Hamilton's success, but the fact that relative to Hamilton, Leclerc seems to be kind of on the back foot. Now, whether that's going to lead to anything, time will tell.
All right, coming back, guys, pretty quick. I'll do the live read.
Hi, this is Max Verstappen, and you're listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
Now, even if you think it's a bit overhyped, AI is suddenly everywhere, from self-driving cars to molecular medicine to business efficiency. If it's not in your industry yet, it's coming fast. But AI needs a lot of speed and computing power. So how do you compete with costs spiraling out of control? Time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. Now, OCI is a blazing fast and secure platform, cloud infrastructure, for your database application development, plus all your AI and machine learning workloads. OCI costs 50% less for compute and 80% less for networking. So you're saving a pile of money. Thousands of businesses have already upgraded to OCI, including Vodafone, Thomson, Reuters, and Suno AI. Right now, Oracle is offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to OCI. For new US customers with a minimum financial commitment, offers ends March 31st. See if your company qualifies for this special offer at oracle.com/formula. That's oracle.com/formula. Welcome back, everyone. We are getting ready for the Chinese Grand Prix. The weather is perfect. I don't see any chance of rain, and it's been that way all weekend long. We were just talking about Oscar Piastri's first pole, and interestingly enough, and we'll play the clip too, George Russell is the man that splits the two favorited McLarens, and I'm just starting to think that Mercedes and Russell specifically are going to be in the hunt this year. Let's hear from George Russell, who starts on the front row.
Where'd that luck come from?
I don't know, but really pleased with it, and it felt it felt as good almost as a pole position, because it was really unexpected. It all came together on that last lap. It was a messy session, nothing was working. I was almost out in Q1, and it was just, didn't have a good feeling, and I threw everything I had at it, and it just came together on the last lap. And to be ahead of a McLaren when there was no sort of major mistakes from them is pretty big. So please.
So you're right in the thick of it, like you said, with the McLarens. The Ferraris behind as well. What can you do tomorrow?
Yeah, I don't know. I think you need to make a good start. I need to try and get ahead of Oscar into turn one. Otherwise, I think they'll be a smidge ahead of everybody. But also, we need to not chase miracles. We've got to be realistic. McLaren are the best at the moment, and we need to ensure that if there's an opportunity to go for the win, we take it, but don't do anything crazy to go for the win and then lose out on the podium. So that's going to be the mentality.
Best luck.
Thank you.
Yeah, very smart thinking, George Russell there, and he really could be a thorn in the side. I'm sure the tactics are for Norris to get past Russell as soon as possible to give McLaren the chance to control the race. You agree, guys?
Yeah, definitely. And Russell knows whereof he speaks. He's had some late race crashes. I can think of one in Melbourne a couple of years ago, one in Singapore. He knows what it is to try that little bit too hard when the car is wearing out under you. It's light on fuel, the tires are worn. That next position you want is right out there, so I'll just try a little harder on this lap, and kaboom! He knows you can throw it all away in a heartbeat. So yeah, I agree. He could be a factor.
And Chris, how good do you think the Mercedes is this year? I mean, George Russell leading the team, totally outqualified Hamilton last year. Could this be a year for he?
I think it could be based on the fact that it looks like one of the most consistent cars on the grid. Pre-season testing, it looked solid. And as I said earlier, the team were very happy coming out of there that they'd addressed weaknesses. They carried that form through into Melbourne. They weren't, a threat for the victory, but they were there. I mean, to finish, it was third and fourth at the end, wasn't it? With the way the race panned out, George getting himself on the podium, and he was pretty calm about that. He wasn't delighted, going crazy that they got a podium at the first race. But Antonelli coming through to fourth in those conditions shows how compliant that car must be as well, for his confidence, for his ability. He's a special talent, Kimi Antonelli, but that was his first race in very tricky conditions. So they were really positive signs. And the same was true of the sprint. I mean, Antonelli was caught in traffic and a bit further back, but for George, again, just almost cruising around just outside the top three. But he was there. He was a threat to Verstappen late on. I think he finished less than 2 seconds behind him. And I think it was said on the Sky commentary that they hadn't really seen Russell or talked about him at any point in the race. He'd just been there. Well, that's essentially exactly where Mercedes has been all year so far. And that's 3 different circuits, 3 different types of scenario that we've seen that from them, different conditions as well. So that suggests they are going to be a factor everywhere. Whether they're ever going to be the dominant team like we saw at a few venues last year, I'm not so sure, because I wonder if they've actually ironed that out of the car as well. In addressing the weaknesses, it takes away the peaks, but it's made it a better all-rounder. I think that might be more the case. But then at the same time, I don't think we'll see so many of the race weekends where they're not there to pick up big points. And if Russell can do that, he's clearly got the mindset already. Maybe a bit like Max, where the win might not always be on, but you can pick up lots of solid points. and build a championship that way this year, because there's going to be lots of different winners. It's not about, one driver versus one other driver and that's it, like it was Hamilton versus Verstappen, for example. So I think we could well see George being a real factor. His biggest problem might well be Antonelli later in the year. I think some of the early signs have been really impressive from Antonelli, and I think there will be races that he takes points off Russell. He could have at Melbourne, the way it played out. I mean, he got up to fourth. So I think just going to have to that might be something they have to keep an eye on, just to make sure that he doesn't actually cost Russell too many points in terms of if they are putting themselves into the mix in the championship picture. But I think they're going to have a strong year, Mercedes.
Yeah, I think there's no question there that George Russell and Toto know that he is the firm number one. Antonelli will be told to do his job. And you're right, though. I think there are times where he'll be faster and he may well pull over a couple of good results over Russell. Well, third on the grid is the man leading the championship at the moment, Britain's Lando Norris, also in a McLaren. Let's hear from him after qualifying.
Feeling about how quality went?
all good. A better quality, just one I was a lot more comfortable. So I think a better result just still shows it's very close between everyone. We still don't have the margin that we would love to have. But a better job than we did yesterday for sure. Like, I just felt a lot more comfortable out there. Not necessarily quicker than we were yesterday, but just more comfy. And that's a good start considering how much I have struggled so far this weekend. So all of that and a good job by Oscar. So
that you feel comfortable with the car must bode well for tomorrow, because it hopefully will allow you to push a bit more. I know there's a lot of unknowns and stuff, but you've still got a decent race car, haven't you, to attack for the win?
I mean, I think the most important thing is just the position that I'm starting from, but tomorrow is still going to be a very long race, difficult to manage the front tyres, and I hope it's in the direction that we want. I still think we're going to struggle. But it's a long night ahead to try and see how much we can improve.
Good luck for tomorrow.
Yeah, interesting. He's not convincing about how good the car is he? Struggle. I think he must have used it 4 times. What's your take, guys?
Well, Chris, you talk to him just about every race weekend. Lando just seems to be such a downbeat guy. I'm looking for something wrong with what I did today. Instead of just, the car is great, let's get out there, very much like Mario Andretti, tell everybody I've got the best car, then my battle is half over. Lando just beats himself up.
He does sometimes, yeah, he really does. And it's a shame to see, because I think when he's confident and he's on his game, he is extremely good. It was funny, I saw the fallout from Melbourne, and a lot of people saying it was his best win, and in some ways I think it was, with what he had to handle. But I didn't think he was perfect by any stretch. I didn't think we saw, wow, that's Lando Norris at the absolute elite level. To be honest, I think the one time we've seen that was at Zandvoort last year, where he'd stuck it on pole. At that stage, he hadn't had a very good start, and he'd always lost the lead and lost quite a few race victories in that way. And again, Verstappen got ahead of him on a track that's tough to overtake, and he just calmly sat there, breezed past about 5 laps later, and disappeared to the tune of 20 odd seconds, and didn't put a wheel wrong. Even in Singapore, where he dominated, he nearly put it in the wall at one stage. And I always feel there is that little 1% that sometimes isn't going perfectly for Norris. And then I think he focuses on it so much that he allows it to become bigger in his mind than it actually is. And he flip-flops between sometimes almost being overly confident and telling people what a great job he's done, and that they're not really respecting the job he's doing. For example, trying to fight Max for the title, and he kept talking about, people aren't appreciating how hard it is, and I'm doing really well. And then at other moments, he's not being self-confident enough. And I think he's still to find that kind of inner peace with how he's going to go about his racing and fight for a championship. That's something that Oscar Piastri, I think, has in spades. And I think that's actually maybe going to unsettle Norris even more, is if Piastri does continue to develop in the way he has been and starts to put in more and more performances where he sticks the car on pole and wins races, don't forget, that's where Norris's advantage has been, is qualifying over 1 lap. And that's probably been a big confidence boost. Then I think it could really get into Norris's head as well. So he could do with a really strong race today. Third wasn't a disaster. He made a slight mistake on his final lap and boxed, but he was still, I think, within a tenth or about a tenth off Piastri. Certainly less than a tenth when he came into the pits, and Russell nipped in there. But he does have the car to at least get ahead of Russell and finish second to Piastri if he keeps it clean. he's got to do what George Russell's been talking about. Don't go throwing everything at it early on. He did it in the sprint, tried to go around the outside of Russell at turn 6, caught a bit of grass, went wide, lost 3 positions. That ruined his race. Happened at the start here last year in the sprint as well against Lewis Hamilton. So he needs to just almost rein it in slightly, calm himself down, as his race engineer Will Joseph was telling him in Melbourne. Let the fact that we have such a quick car take you forward. Don't try and overdo it yourself. Don't overdrive it. So I think that's got to be his approach.
Very good point. Yeah, well, we'll see what happens today. An important race for him as well, even though it's early in the season. Well, we'll take a short break. We're about 30 minutes away from the start of the Chinese Grand Prix from Shanghai, round 2 of the championship for 2025. Join us after this. T&W from Thailand. I knew he'd be on. It's an important race for Oscar. He's got to earn that 20 mil contract he just got. Yeah, fair enough. Andy P, of course, is here. McLaren at the front. And he said hairpin of his life. Ironically, I was listening on Checkered Flag and they were saying that actually Oscar's lap was no different really than Lando's. But he just Lando pulled out of it. And that hairpin that Piastri sent it, as he said, made the difference to catch it up and just get ahead of Russell. Who else is on board? Bill Ricker. Morning, all. Yep. And like I said, Thailand and AP. Mike Bowles is here. Morning, everyone.
What are you lunatics doing up at this hour?
Exactly. It's a good question. Well, stay with us. Now you've made the effort. You may as well stay with us. We're going to try and get through this.
Well,
we'll be relying on Chris Medland for the post show. I hope you know that, Chris.
That's fine. It's about time I pull my weight on a post show, isn't it, this year?
Oh no, I don't think so.
I'll be on.
Which ones have you chosen not to go to?
China, Brazil, as it stands. Maybe Qatar, because it'll depend on the championship picture. That's late in the season, so I think I'm likely to go there. And Imola is TBC. That's the start of a triple header.
I was with you all the way there until you said Imola, because you can't miss miss Imola.
Well, I
can't miss Imola.
It's a brilliant circuit and it's so atmospheric, but I tell you what, the facilities are terrible for us.
Yeah, that's true.
Again, it's just matching with ones that Jess is producing, so she's in the gallery.
Oh, good point.
And has been all week. So I'm on dog sitting duty, but I've just got to pick my battles. There's still 20 I'll be at least, probably 21, maybe 22. So,
and how many does she do?
Yeah, she does 8 in the gallery overnight. So realistically, I should miss 8, but I only miss half of that.
All right. Well, coming back, boys.
Hello to everyone. This is Gunther Steiner. This is Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
Welcome back. We're just over 26 minutes away from the start of the Chinese Grand Prix. Piastri on pole, Russell in second, then Norris, Verstappen and Hamilton. Now, as we mentioned at the top of the show, Lewis Hamilton got his first victory for Ferrari after what was sort of a non-plus start to the year at Melbourne, where he kind of looked a little unsteady, to be honest, and certainly his radio feedback was not great. He just wanted to be left alone. He wasn't happy with the balance of the car, but he is a much happier man now, the 44, because he has won the sprint race. But he's qualified 5th, but more importantly, outqualified his teammate, Charles Leclerc, who is in 6th. Let's hear what Lewis Hamilton had to say about his 5th place qualifying.
Is good yesterday.
Yeah, we made some changes. We made a couple of changes, but nothing major. And the car was really, really hard to drive. It just wasn't hugging the road. I don't know if it got a bit more gusty, and then the car was a bit harder.
Obviously, you managed to look after the tyres super well today. Does that give you a bit of hope tomorrow that the race pace will be better?
Well, again, we made these changes, so I don't know how that will affect the pace for tomorrow, but it shouldn't be too bad. I think it's just everyone showed today that was really difficult to follow. So, but I'm going to think of tonight of how to win.
Good luck tomorrow. Thanks.
Yeah, and it's going to be a case of that, isn't it, Chris? It's going to be a case of if you get into a long chain follow, you got to be careful because those tyres are going to go off on this really grippy surface.
Yeah, it's going to be tough in the first parts of the race. I think actually you're going to see people really fight hard on the opening couple of laps and then have to settle down into their position and don't switch off at that stage. It's going to be like a holding pattern before it starts to get exciting again as everyone starts to struggle, because no one will start on a hard compound tyre. I'd be amazed if many did, because that might be the more robust tyre, but you might lose positions at the start and you can't afford to do that. You can't afford to go backwards. One thing I have noticed actually, I mean, I'm hating this not being roaming on the grid, but I've still kept my eye on the grid, and I've seen there's been some sort of spillage, whether it's oil or fuel, all along the right-hand side of the grid as you look to turn one. So the even number grid slots. So George Russell, Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, 246 backwards. They've got some dust down on. They look like they tried to clean it up, but the tiniest impact that can have off the line of a bit more wheel spin, and you're going to be really, really hurt by it. So for Hamilton, maybe that's a blessing in disguise, because I think in many ways his biggest obstacle early in the race is going to be getting past Max Verstappen. Verstappen is never going to be easy to overtake, and if he could get him off the line and only have the two McLarens and Russell ahead of him, then I think he'll feel a bit more confident. I think from there he might have a chance of moving forward maybe one more place if the McLaren pace is what we expect. But that, like I say, those moves will either come right at the start of the race or much later in the race. And it's going to put a premium on the opening couple of laps, which might mean we get a few incidents.
Yeah, and having watched the F1 Academy, I did see there was a line around the outside to sling round, but I don't know whether that's possible in Formula One and how dirty it is out there. It's a tricky first corner, no question about it. If you can hold it round the outside, you will have the inside line for turn two, but it's a risk. It really is. Bob, I want to turn to you next. I've got two subjects I want to bring up. One is Hadjar, the other is Lawson. Let's first of all deal with Isaac Hadjar. Very impressive, out qualifying Yuki Tsunoda, his teammate, and getting seventh. Great bounce back after what was a tough weekend last week.
Well, no question about it, and a spectacular one. I think it says volumes about this French Algerian kid who was so emotional about crashing on the formation lap, and on a very tricky day in Melbourne. We saw other crashes. Jack Doohan crashed, Carlos Sainz crashed, and not long after Isaac Hadjar crashed. So certainly not the way a rookie wants to start his Formula One career, but he has definitely come back and performed wonderfully, especially beating Tsunoda, who's really on the bounce right now. I think he's got.
Oh, we lost you. Don't know why, but we've lost you, Bob. Anyway, just
Red Bull saying he's not allowed to praise Yuki Tsunoda. Can't be having people talking up Tsunoda because I don't know what it is about that team, but they just do not seem to put their faith in Yuki, do they? But he's right that Isaac's been massively impressive. He showed those
half a second quicker than Yuki,
crashing.
by the way.
Yeah, and the Yuki had a big off. He went off at, I want to say it's turn 13, the long right-hander that leads onto the back straight. He had a little snap of oversteer and then obviously kept it pinned and kept the wheel angles that normally would be and just scrubbed wide and went completely off track. So that ruined his lap. So it meant he only had one times lap in the end, which it caused a bigger gap. But I think Hadjar had the measure of him in quali, or certainly was going to match him. And that was what was so impressive there was we'd seen the signs in Melbourne that Hadjar had the pace. He'd been strong, but then hadn't quite put it together in qualifying. Then had that big blow. So to have only a few days to turn it around, he said it helped him switch his mindset. But you've still got to deliver. You've still got to be able to go out there and prove, okay, that was just a complete anomaly. I'm much better than this. And that wouldn't have been simple with the focus that had been on him and Helmut Marko's comments. Yeah. And I think that's a really good sign of, weirdly, Marko almost hinted at mental fragility with the way he reacted with the tears after Melbourne. Mental strength is what we saw with the way he's bounced back.
Yeah, I agree. Well, why don't we hear from the man himself, Isaac Hadjar from the RB team, qualified 7th for this weekend's race.
As well.
Yeah, I mean, amazing. Yesterday already they were on it. They gave me a really good car. I made a mistake, and today I didn't. So finished the job. It's a satisfying one. Yeah.
In terms of tomorrow and the change you made to the car between the sprint and quali, do you feel like you've got a car that can really keep you there at minimum and maybe go even better?
I would say guys ahead are out of reach, of course, but I think there is like Antonelli behind also on I don't know 50 laps. Obviously, it's gonna be super hard to keep behind, but guys behind me, I think I have a good chance, and I look forward to fight for 4 points. That's for sure.
Best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, obviously a different fella than we saw downhearted last week. I do think that Anthony Hamilton's gesture was perfect. I kept thinking as he was walking down the paddock, somebody give him a hug.
Yeah, spectacular. Yeah.
You're back, Bob.
Sorry, I dropped out there.
That's all right.
My internet. Yeah, the internet crashed for some reason.
You know,
I don't know what's going on. But...
Chris, I'm just watching Martin Brundle do his grid walk, and that patch that you're talking about on the inside of oil and dry dirt or whatever. What do you call it? Dry dust, or what do you call it? Wet dry.
Cement dust normally, I think.
Yeah,
oil dry.
But yeah, it was a support race before the F1 Academy race, which actually did 2 safety car laps. Because of that, they were worried about it. It didn't turn out to be a factor, but yeah, they weren't. They ended up doing a rolling start. But this is going to be interesting for that reason alone. Now, guys, I got to turn to the subject that is the elephant in the room, and that is Liam Lawson. I don't like round 2 to be making any judgments, but hey, the world is making judgments already, and let's face it, there's some precedent here. But Chris, I'm going to turn to you on this one. Obviously, Lawson's had a disastrous start to his year, but he's been with his team for 6 years. They know who he is. They know what he can do. They chose him over Tsunoda. I guess my question is, I realize he's having a huge crisis, and he's very honest. We'll hear from him in a moment. But are Red Bull partly to blame for some of this?
Oh, 100%. I wrote about it before he was named, actually, when it was clear that Perez was going to be out. And I don't mind admitting that I'm a big Liam Lawson fan, but I said they were making the wrong decision. He only had 11 Grand Prix under his belt. It's such a difficult environment in Red Bull. Perez's failure showed how hard it was, showed that there were problems. There was one drive, you put Lawson in there, this was the risk. That it highlighted those problems. It's not on Lawson, it's on the team can't run 2 cars and can't produce a car that's drivable to the majority of the grid. And Max Verstappen's brilliance is what's carrying them through. But the flip side as well was Tsunoda has been there and had so much experience and matched, if not beaten, so many high quality drivers. He was the guy you kind of could risk losing. You could risk putting him in alongside Max and it going wrong because you go, you know what? Now we know everything we need to know. It's time to replace him. And in doing that, you gave Lawson some more time to get some more experience. Don't forget, these are tracks he's not raced on. He'd never driven at Albert Park, whereas all the other rookies have done F2 there. He's never driven at Shanghai either. Same will be true. I think Suzuka, I don't think matched up with the way the calendar worked either. But he's certainly the majority of the first part of the season he's not driven on. Suzuka, I must admit, he must have done in Super Formula.
Yeah.
But for Lawson, I felt he needed, or would have been better served, if you're thinking just about him and his development too, in having a year where he'd be the lead driver at Racing Bulls alongside Hadjar, have that pressure of, okay, you've shown you can do it as a substitute driver, but go and do it as the lead driver that we're putting more expectation on. Then you step him up to Red Bull if Yuki fails. And if Yuki doesn't fail, happy days. You actually didn't expect him to do so well, but he did. Instead, you've gambled with essentially Lawson's career, because if this carries on and he doesn't manage to show what he's capable of in that Red Bull car and they do make a change, then
it's over.
Where does he go from there? It's so hard for him to come back. I'd say Pierre Gasly's the only one who's really done it. Alex Albon kind of, but his departure wasn't quite so damning from Red Bull. So I think it would be really tough for him, and I think that would be down to poor management. And I just felt that Red Bull were making that gamble last year when they made this call, and I felt that was unfair on the driver.
Yeah, and I'm like you. I'm a fan, and I think the main reason I am is his honesty. He's a breath of fresh air, and ever since he's been in Formula 1 and Formula 2, he's always worn his heart on his sleeve. Let's have a listen to him now, because, again, in this sort of second weekend alone, he's willing to accept responsibility. Here's Liam Lawson.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very tough. And yeah, I can get upset at the traffic issues and things like that, but it shouldn't be the difference between me getting through or not. I have a whole lot of things to sort out myself before I can look at getting a little bit of traffic and things like that. So it's just frustrating.
Have you got any idea why it's so tough at the minute? Because you've obviously come into this season you had such a great year last year. You just don't seem to have adapted so far to the car.
The window's it's very small in this car, but it's not an excuse. It's just something I need to get a grip on, and we have sort of glimpses of it where it feels good, but it's just a very small window, and I just need to get on top of it.
Well, good luck, Tim.
Thank you.
Yeah, like I said, the honesty's there. Here's a theory, and Bob, I'll throw this at you first, and Chris, say what you will. But could it be the case that the Red Bull isn't that good and wasn't that good last year, and the only way to put it to the sharp end is to build the car literally specifically for Max, which he likes, sharp end at the front, all the rest of it, we've heard it a million times, but it becomes a dog of a car to drive for almost anybody else. I mean, Albon, everybody that's tried, Gasly, Ricciardo, everybody else who's had a go has just not been successful. Could it be that the car, that the whole situation at Red Bull is built around Max?
Oh, it could very well be that way. I mean, Red Bull knows what they've got in Max Verstappen. He is a giant talent, one of those generational guys like a Hamilton. And, they're going to ride that pony as long as they can. We said it time after time last year. If you want to see how good the Red Bull is, look at what Sergio Perez is doing with it. And now look at what Liam Lawson is doing with it. It's a car that is very, very difficult for anybody to do well with. And Max is not really happy with it right now, but he's managing to wring results out of it. So he's willing to, keep his powder dry while they work on the car and try to solve the issues that they have and that everybody has up and down the pit lane. I mean, let's be honest. Everybody's got these essentially new cars. And you've got these situations like the rain without a lot wet testing in Melbourne. And now this new track surface here. I don't know what Suzuka is going to throw up next week, but there's bound to be something. So, I think it's a car that is built around Max, and you have to factor that into your plans or else figure out a way to neutralize the problems that it gives the other driver on the other side of the garage.
Yeah. Well, listen,
go ahead.
Liam
Lawson forgot how to drive a car.
No, absolutely. And he's got the talent. There's no question about that. And in the 11 races we saw last year, we saw a lot of that. And he looked very comfortable in that RB. Listen, we've got to take a short break. We are just a few minutes away now from the start of the Chinese Grand Prix. Stay with us. After the break, the big man will give us his grid. Andy P says the RBR is all in on Max. All of the second drivers other than Perez owe their careers to RBR. So it makes so much harder for the drivers to question the team's stance and setup. Yeah, I still don't think, for all the, I don't know. Helmut, I wonder what the team would look like if Helmut Marko wasn't there. That's a question. You could put some blame from, it's his choice. Yeah. He's the guy that picks the drivers. And I agree with you, Chris, a little bit. Was it the right choice? I don't know. Like I said, I want to see what Lawson can do. Perez definitely needed to go. But I do think that Lawson won't be judged today, but he will be judged at Japan, a circuit he's won at in Super Formula and one he knows very well.
Yeah, he's up against it in that sense. And also just in that team, people are so quick to judge. Yeah. And the fact he's been last, that's this weekend, that's what's hurt. It's plumb last, which there's been signs that he wasn't going to be.
Do you want me to do this other
you also look at the gap to the RB car. It's been a couple of times, it's been mentioned, got mentioned in Melbourne actually by a couple of team members, that the RB car was close enough to the Red Bull that what would Max do in the RB car? Maybe if Hadjar was just over 2/10 off Verstappen in qualifying yesterday, Tsunoda would have been exactly there too. And Max then hinted it himself. He said, Liam was much more comfortable in the Racing Bulls. He would be where they are, definitely, at least, and they are much closer to me. So that maybe says something. So maybe it is the car in that sense, where it would be brilliant to see. I don't think they'll ever do it, but stick Max in that Racing Bulls car for a weekend and see what he does.
That should be the shake-up.
Get your answers.
Well, we could play musical Red Bull chairs where, we put all four cars in a row and it's like when the music stops, get to your car.
Yeah, love to see it. Genuinely would.
It can't be deliberate because they know they're not going to win the Constructors' Championship with one driver.
Nope, that's true. Bob, I want to come to you to do the grid if it's all right.
I'm George Russell, and you're listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
Welcome back. Oracle Cloud Infrastructure can help you cut your cloud bill in half if you act by May 31st. See if you qualify for half off at oracle.com/formula. Welcome back to Speed City. Here on SiriusXM, we are moments away from the start of the Chinese Grand Prix, but we haven't really gone through the grid. And what better place to go than the man himself, Bob Varsha, to take us through this weekend's grid.
Thank you, Jonathan. On row one, Oscar Piastri starts for pole in the McLaren's first career pole for the Australian, who finished second in Saturday's sprint. Now, if he can just avoid mistakes like the one that derailed him in Melbourne and keep the car under him on this abrasive surface, I think it's all coming up Oscar in Shanghai. P2, George Russell in the Mercedes, fourth in the sprint. The Mercedes is arguably second only to the McLaren's in terms of speed in a very closely bunched top four teams. And track position will be critical, as is staying in clean air, so Russell's start will tell the tale for him. Row 2, P3, Lando Norris and the other McLaren, coming off a victory from pole in Melbourne, but this repaved Shanghai circuit really hasn't messed with the Englishman's driving style, producing lockups and missed apexes. Just eighth in the sprint, but last year's title runner-up is in with a chance from third. P4, Max Verstappen of the Red Bull. The four-time defending world champ says the car still isn't where he wants it after challenging for the win in the sprint before killing his tires and dropping to third behind the winner, Lewis Hamilton and Oscar Piastri. Row 3, P5, the aforementioned Lewis Hamilton in the Ferrari after a suboptimal debut for Ferrari in Melbourne last week. As we've discussed, the seven-time world champ came to China with a list of desired changes to the car. They made them, and voila, a win in the sprint race from pole by almost 7 seconds over just 19 laps. But does a fifth in GP qualifying sow a seed of new doubt? P6, Charles Leclerc in the second Ferrari, fifth in the sprint. And if he didn't know it after testing in the season opener, the Ferrari team number one may be in danger of falling into the shadow of his super successful new teammate, Hamilton. Row 4, P7, Isaac Hadjar for Racing Bulls. Emotional after crashing out of the Melbourne race on the formation lap, but the French rookie jumped right back on the horse with a 13th place in the sprint and then a top 10 in GP qualifying. P8, Kimi Antonelli in the Mercedes. The 18-year-old has scored points in all two of his races for Mercedes. No big deal, you think? I think not. Elevated from fifth to fourth after a 5-second penalty in Melbourne was reversed on appeal, and he finished seventh in yesterday's sprint. Row 5, P9, Yuki Tsunoda for Racing Bulls. The Japanese driver was sixth in the sprint, but when asked afterward, as I mentioned earlier, whether he favored the idea of replacing the struggling Liam Lawson in the Red Bull, he said 100%. P10, Alex Albon in the Williams. Is the ex-Red Bull man trying to prove something after all the praise heaped on his new teammate, Carlos Sainz? If so, it's working. He's outrunning Sainz once again in qualifying a week after a fighting fifth place in Australia. Row 6, P11 is Esteban Ocon in the first of the Haas. The American squad ran into rear wing problems as they tried to improve after a miserable Aussie weekend, still without a point after finishing 16th in the sprint. Is Esteban Ocon. In 12th on the grid, Nico Hülkenberg in the Sauber, just 19th in the sprint, but the most experienced driver without a race win can console himself with the fact that he finally got the better of his rookie teammate, Gabriel Bortoleto, in GP qualifying. Row 7, P13, Fernando Alonso with the Aston Martin. Running at the front of the midfield teams must seem like a long time ago for Team Green, as Fernando and Lance Stroll finished 10th and 9th in the sprint, while Alonso managed to reverse those positions in GP qualifying. P14, therefore, is Lance Stroll in the second Aston, who leads his two-time world champion in the standings after 2 competitions. Design guru Adrian Newey can't get his arms around his new team fast enough. Row 8, P15, Carlos Sainz in the second Williams. Complaining of car balance problems and an issue with his seat, the ex-Ferrari man echoes the complaint of more than a few drivers, namely a lack of mileage in the car. Of course, he must know you get more mileage if you don't crash on lap 1, as Sainz did last week. P16 is Pierre Gasly in the first Alpine, 12th in the sprint after falling afoul of traffic in sprint qualifying 1 and starting 17th. A lot of head scratching is going on in the Alpine garage, coming off an 11th place finish in Australia. Row 9, P17, Oliver Behrman in the second Haas. Another early retirement in Australia with a gearbox problem after overnight crash repair. The British rookie came up with a more representative 15th place run in the sprint here in China from a 12th place start. P18, Jack Doohan in the second Alpine. Finished last in the sprint after a 10-second penalty for minor contact with fellow rookie Bortoleto, plus 2 penalty points. But even after qualifying 18th for the big show, the Aussie says he likes his car. Row 10, P19, Gabriel Bortoleto in the Sauber, 18th in the sprint after that contact with Doohan after starting 14th on the grid, qualified 15th here and qualified 15th and DNF'd a week ago in Melbourne. And P20 is Liam Lawson, whom we've been talking about in the second Red Bull. The rookie stumbled out of the gate here in China once again, but a 14th place finish in the sprint from a 19th place grid slot may show a glimmer of potential for the Kiwi, and it couldn't come at a better time. Now it's time to go racing.
Certainly is, and because of that, let's turn to our F1 sage. And Chris, we are literally a minute or so away. What should our audience look for from the start of this one?
Yeah, definitely look for some incidents in turns 1 and 2. The way the track layout works, so many cars going through there is going to be dicey because they're going to be so desperate to gain track position. We've got everyone down to Lance Stroll in 14th, starting on the medium tyre. Stroll starting on the hard. So's Ollie Behrman in the Haas and Lawson from the pit lane on the hard as well. So everyone else on the mediums, which means they're kind of looking at a similar strategy, which means they're going to have to get track position early. So I think we're going to get some really punchy first couple of laps. And it could be that you get some damage picked up and some incidents in there as well. And I think the key is, can the McLaren get into clear air? Because if not, I think we've got a race on our hands between 4 teams. I think Verstappen's in the mix, the Ferraris, Russell as well for Mercedes. But if Piastri and or Norris get into the lead or stay in the lead at the start, then they'll be sitting pretty with the pace they should have. So it's going to be crucial. It really is. There's sometimes that, the start wasn't so crucial in Melbourne other than don't crash. Here, it could really set up your whole afternoon.
And could there be some 3 stoppers, especially if there's an incident or 2 that puts us under safety?
I think there very well could be. Yep.
Yeah, it depends on the timing of the safety car and how good you are on the medium tyres. But everyone has 2 new sets of hard tyres that they've saved for the race. So that opens that up for at least 2, if not 3 stops.
Guys, we failed.
The DRS is going to be important, and the undercut, they say, could be decisive here. Keep in mind, one thing we haven't talked about, the temperature, air temperature is in the low 80s in China. So for those cars who do manage to survive turns 1, 2, and 3, it's going to be a long day and hard work.
All right, 1 minute to go. Predictions. We failed miserably last time out. Chris, though, I think you were closest last time, so I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I predicted Piastri to not finish in the top 3, didn't I? Because I said about the curse for the Australians. I feel like I almost jinxed him with his own jinx. So I'm going to have him to win today. I'm going to go with Piastri, Norris, Verstappen.
Okay, Bob?
Let's see. I will go with Piastri, Russell, Hamilton.
Okay, and I'm going to go Russell, Hamilton, Norris. How about that?
Tasty.
Ah, I love it. Well, I can see out of the corner of my eye that the tyre warmers are coming off and the music is playing, so that usually means shut the heck up, Greenie. So I shall do that and hand over to the BBC and their coverage of the Chinese Grand Prix. Enjoy. We'll be right back after the race to wrap it all up.